Welcome to the Sleepy Science Vault. You've found your way here, and that alone means something. It means that somewhere inside you, some quiet part of you that is still bending beneath the weight of everything else, that part of you is ready to rest. And that is a beautiful thing. That is exactly where we want to be tonight. So let's begin by doing something simple, something that doesn't require effort or thought or planning. Just let your body soften a little. If you are lying down, feel the surface beneath you, the mattress, the pillow, the blanket, all of it holding you without asking anything in return. You don't need to move. You don't need to fix anything. You just need to be here, quietly, for a little while. Let your shoulders soften, not dramatically, not with great intention. Just allow them to drop a fraction of an inch lower than they are right now. That small release is enough. Notice your breathing. Don't try to change it. Just notice it. The soft rise and fall of your chest. The way the air enters cool and leaves a little warmer. The way your body does this automatically, quietly, without your permission or involvement, thousands of times a day, thousands of times tonight. Even as you sleep, your body will continue breathing, continuing this slow, gentle rhythm that has been with you since your very first moment of existence. There is nowhere else you need to be tonight. Whatever happened today, whatever you carried through the hours, whatever conversations or worries or unfinished thoughts still echo somewhere in the back of your mind, none of that needs your attention right now. Tonight, that can all rest. Just as you are resting, everything can be still. Allow the weight of the day to quietly fade. Not suddenly, not all at once. Just imagine it very slowly dissolving at the edges, becoming softer and less defined, like ink dropped into warm water, spreading outward, diluting gently until it becomes something you can barely notice anymore. That is what tonight is for. The slow, almost imperceptible loosening of things. The Sleepy Science Vault exists for moments like this one, for the kind of tired that lives in your bones, not just your eyes, for the kind of rest that doesn't come from silence alone, but from being gently carried through something vast and distant and quietly beautiful, something that reminds you how ancient the world is, how enormous and mysterious the universe remains, and how very small and peaceful our place within it can feel when we allow it. Tonight, we are going to wander together through the oldest and strangest corridors of human history. We are going to look at ancient mysteries, things that have puzzled researchers, philosophers, archaeologists, and scientists for decades, sometimes for centuries. Things that have no clean, complete, satisfying explanation. Things that sit in that beautiful dim borderland between what we know and what we cannot yet understand. And we are going to do it slowly. We are going to take our time. We are not in any hurry at all. This is not a race through facts. This is not a rapid-fire list. Think of this instead as a very long, very gentle walk through a museum that never closes. A museum where the exhibits are old stone chambers and ancient maps and strange markings and forgotten civilizations and mathematical impossibilities carved into places that should never have been able to hold them. We will move slowly through each room. We will look at each thing for a long time. We will ask questions that have no final answers, and we will find that somehow the asking itself is a kind of peace. Let your eyes close if they haven't already. Let your breath do its quiet work and come with me gently into the ancient dark. We begin at a place that seems, on first impression, straightforward. A plateau in southern Peru, a high, dry plain where the air is thin and the soil is pale and cracked, and the sky above is enormous. You could stand there and feel very small, and you would be right to feel that way. This is the Nazca Plateau, and spread across it, carved into the earth itself, are lines, hundreds and hundreds of lines. Some of them are perfectly straight, stretching for miles across uneven terrain, without deviation, without wavering, without any natural reason to run the direction they run. They were made by removing the reddish-brown surface stones to reveal the pale, yellowish ground beneath. Simple in concept, and yet, somehow, together, they form enormous shapes that can only be fully understood from above. From the air, you see them clearly: a hummingbird, a spider, a monkey, a condor, with wings spread so wide that from one wingtip to the other measures over 100 meters. A human figure with one arm raised toward the sky. Spirals, triangles, trapezia, so precisely measured that modern engineers have stood above them with instruments and shaken their heads quietly. And the question that has followed these lines for nearly 100 years, the question that never quite goes away, is why? Why did the Nazca people, who lived in this region roughly between the 1st and 7th centuries of the Common Era, spend years, possibly generations, etching these enormous figures into a landscape they could never fully see? The figures are not visible from the ground. From the ground, you see only lines disappearing into the distance, flat and unremarkable. The full images, the hummingbird and the monkey, and the great reaching hands of the human figure, those exist only from above, only from an altitude no person of that era should have been able to reach. That fact alone is enough to sit with for a long moment. Imagine the patience of it, the commitment, a community of people working together, generation after generation, to complete images that no living member of their community would ever see in full. There is something in it which is almost impossible to hold in the mind. We are so accustomed in the modern world to immediate feedback, to seeing the results of our efforts, to understanding the complete shape of what we are building. These people had none of that. They worked in faith. They worked in tradition. They worked toward a vision that existed, perhaps, only in drawings, only in concept, only in the imagination of the people who first designed the lines. Or perhaps they worked toward something else entirely. Some researchers have suggested that the lines served as ceremonial walking paths, sacred routes that the Nazca people followed during religious rituals, tracing the outline of the figures on foot as a kind of moving prayer, a kinetic devotion. From that perspective, the shape of the figure didn't need to be seen from above. The act of walking it was the point. The image was not meant for human eyes at all, but for the eyes of whatever the Nazca believed was watching from above. That idea has a quiet beauty to it, the notion that sacred geometry doesn't always need to be witnessed, only enacted. That the body moving through space, following the correct path, tracing the correct figure, could itself be the offering. And if that is true, then these lines were never meant to be seen from the sky by human beings. They were meant to be felt step by step by people walking quietly across the earth in the direction their ancestors had set. And yet the precision remains difficult to explain. Modern researchers have used simple wooden stakes and rope to demonstrate that the geometric accuracy of the lines could theoretically have been achieved without aerial view. That careful measurement on the ground, extrapolated outward, could produce a shape that resolves correctly from above. And that may be true. Mathematics is a remarkable tool. Careful people with careful instruments can produce extraordinary results, even without the ability to see the whole picture. But there is something about walking across that plateau, standing beside a line that runs straight for miles across terrain that is not itself straight, terrain that rises and dips and curves, Something about standing beside that line and watching it hold its direction with quiet, absolute confidence. That makes purely practical explanations feel slightly insufficient. The Nazca Lines are estimated to be somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 years old. They have survived that long because the plateau is one of the driest places on Earth. Rain, which would otherwise erode them, almost never falls. Wind carries dust, but not enough to fill them in significantly. They exist in a kind of natural preservation, a gift from the climate, as though the earth itself was determined to hold these shapes intact until someone came along who could appreciate the full scale of what they mean. And we still don't fully know what they mean. That is the thing. That is the quietly beautiful, slightly unsettling thing. A century of archaeology, of aerial photography, of satellite imaging, of ground penetrating radar, of soil analysis and carbon dating and ceremonial object excavation. And the Nazca Lines still do not have a single explanation that every researcher agrees upon. The water theory, the astronomical calendar theory, the ritual walking theory, the offering to the sky gods theory, they all have evidence in their favor. They all have weaknesses. The lines simply hold their silence, stretched out across the pale, dry earth, keeping whatever secret they carry, unmoved by our questions. There is something restful in that, if you allow it to be. The idea that not everything yields to inquiry, that some things have the right to remain a little mysterious, that the world is larger than our ability to fully explain it. Let that thought settle in around you. Let the image of those lines drift through your mind. Long, pale marks on a vast plateau. A monkey with a curling tail. A spider with 8 perfectly measured legs. A hummingbird hovering in stone. And feel very gently the weight of how much time has already passed in this world without us knowing about it. 2,000 years is not very long in geological time. It is not very long even in human civilization, but it is long enough that the people who made those lines are entirely gone, every one of them. And what remains is only the marks they left in the earth, asking us, still asking us, even now, from that silence, to look up. Soften a little more, if you can. Let the image of the plateau fade to something soft and distant. You are still here. The night is still quiet around you. There is no rush. Let's move now, slowly, in the way that thoughts move just before sleep. Not abruptly, but by gentle association, by the kind of drift that connects one idea to the next through something felt rather than reasoned, to another place that shares a similar quality of beautiful, patient mystery. Far across the world from Peru, in the Atlantic Ocean between England and Portugal, there is an island called the Azores, and beneath those waters, in the shallow volcanic shelf that surrounds the islands, there are formations, stone formations, lines of stone, structures that some researchers have argued do not look entirely natural. The Atlantic holds many secrets. The ocean floor is one of the least explored surfaces on our planet. More mapped and understood, in some ways, is the surface of the moon. There is so much beneath the water that we have never seen and may never see, because the pressure and the darkness make exploration extraordinarily difficult. And so when unusual formations appear in shallow coastal water, they attract a very particular kind of attention. These formations near the Azores, and similar ones that have been identified along the eastern coastal shelves of what is now the Americas, and near the shores of Japan, and in the waters around Malta and Sardinia, represent one of the larger, persistent puzzles in the conversation about ancient human civilization. Because here is the thing: the last great ice age ended approximately 12,000 years ago. At the peak of that ice age, sea levels were significantly lower than they are today. The shallow continental shelves, which are now underwater, were then dry land, coastal land, the kind of land where, if people were living and building things, they would naturally have lived and built. And 12,000 years ago, people absolutely were living on those coasts. The Natufian culture was active in the ancient Levant. Cave art was being made in France and Spain and Indonesia. The earliest agricultural experiments were beginning in the Fertile Crescent. People were carving Venus figurines and stringing beads and navigating open water in boats and domesticating dogs and burying their dead with ceremony and ochre and flowers. They were, in other words, people, complex, creative, spiritual, intelligent people who had been anatomically modern for at least 100,000 years before those underwater formations were last above sea level. And so the question becomes, is it possible that some of what we now consider the oldest cities and temples and monuments, things we date to 5 or 6 or 7,000 years ago, are in fact much younger than the civilization that preceded them? Is it possible that there were coastal settlements, perhaps even architecturally sophisticated ones, that now lie beneath 100 feet of ocean because the ice melted and the water rose and the sea simply swallowed them quietly over millennia. Mainstream archaeology is cautious about this, and it should be. Caution is appropriate in the absence of clear evidence. But the question does not go away entirely, because the geological story is not in doubt. The sea level did rise. The coastal land did disappear. People did live on that land, and we have found in multiple places around the world what appear to be man-made or man-modified structures beneath the water in places that were coastal 12,000 years ago. Off the coast of Yonaguni in Japan, there is a formation of stone that has attracted significant debate since it was first widely reported in the 1980s. It consists of flat, terraced surfaces, right angles, what appear to be steps and pathways, and walls, all cut from sandstone in ways that have made some researchers argue it cannot be entirely natural. Others, equally credentialed, argue that the natural geology of sandstone in that region produces exactly these kinds of features, that flat surfaces and right angles can emerge from the fracture patterns of layered sedimentary rock without any human intervention. The debate is real, the uncertainty is genuine, and what is fascinating about it is not the specifics, not whether this particular formation is natural or artificial, but what it represents more broadly. It represents the possibility, which cannot be entirely dismissed, that we are missing chapters, that the story of human civilization that we have pieced together so carefully through artifacts and ruins and written records and soil analysis may have a prologue that the sea swallowed, that somewhere beneath the ocean there may be evidence of people thinking and building and caring about things that would fundamentally alter how we understand the length and complexity of the human story. The sea keeps its secrets with the same quiet patience as the Nazca Plateau, and somewhere in the darkness of the deep water, in the cold and the pressure and the absolute silence, whatever is down there has been waiting for 12,000 years for someone with the right equipment and the right question to come and look. There is something deeply calming about the thought of things that have been waiting a very long time. Time when you try to hold it in your mind at the scale of tens of thousands of years becomes something almost liquid. It stops feeling like a sequence of events and starts feeling more like a substance, something that fills the spaces between things, that saturates everything it touches, that carries objects and ideas and people and civilizations from one moment to the next, without judgment or hurry. 12,000 years. Let that sit for a moment. Let it expand. If you were to count 1 second for each year, 12,000 years would take about 3.5 hours to count through. If you were to count 1 minute for each year, you would be counting for more than 8 days without stopping. And if each year were represented by 1 step, the average walking step, about 2.5 feet, you would need to walk roughly 5.5 miles to cross 12,000 years. But the formations beneath the sea have been there, mostly undisturbed, for the equivalent of more than 5 miles of walking time. That is how old the question is. And the oldest physical evidence of human architectural complexity that we currently have, the temples at Göbekli Tepe in what is now southeastern Turkey, dates to approximately 11,600 years ago, which means it, too, is from this same extraordinary threshold of time, the end of the Ice Age, the rising of the seas, the moment when the world as we know it began to crystallize out of something older and colder and less defined. Göbekli Tepe is one of the most remarkable sites in the archaeology of ancient humanity, and it deserves to be held gently for a long time, because what it represents is a genuine challenge, not a fringe challenge, not a conspiracy theory, but a mainstream, peer-reviewed, internationally recognized challenge to how we have traditionally understood the development of civilization. The standard model of human cultural development, the model that was dominant for much of the 20th century, went something like this. First came agriculture. People settled in one place to farm, and settlement required organization, and organization led to specialization of labor, and specialization of labor led to temples and writing and monuments and all the other markers of what we call complex civilization. Agriculture was the spark. Everything else followed from it. Göbekli Tepe quietly dismantles this sequence. Because the temples at Göbekli Tepe, the enormous carved stone pillars arranged in circles, covered in relief sculptures of foxes and cranes and scorpions and vultures, built to a height and complexity that required coordinated labor on a large scale. Those temples predate agriculture in the region by what appears to be at least several hundred years. The people who built Göbekli Tepe were not farmers. They were hunter-gatherers, people who moved through the landscape, following animals and seasonal plants, who carried what they owned, who had no permanent address, who by the standard model should not have been capable of the kind of organized, sustained, purpose-driven construction that these temples required. And yet, there they are, 11,600 years old and still standing, still partially standing in the limestone hills of what is now Turkey. And what they suggest is not that the standard model is completely wrong, but that it may have the causation reversed. Some researchers now propose that it was not agriculture that made complex social organization possible, but that complex social organization, the kind required to build a temple, to feed the workers who built it, to plan and coordinate and maintain the effort over years, that this organization may actually have driven the development of agriculture, that people came together for spiritual or ceremonial reasons, that feeding those gatherings required something more reliable than hunting and foraging, and that this need, repeated and intensified over time, was what eventually pushed people toward cultivation, religion before farming, ceremony before agriculture, the sacred impulse preceding the practical one. There is something in that reversal that feels quietly profound if you let it settle, because it suggests that what made human beings into civilization builders was not practicality, not the simple, sensible desire to have enough to eat. It suggests that what pushed us into the work of collective, organized, sustained labor was something more mysterious, something that made people want to come together and carve enormous stone pillars with animal reliefs and arrange them in circles and bury them under rubble when they were finished, a process, by the way, that itself remains unexplained. The deliberate burial of the temples under tons of fill, and walk away and build more. What were they doing there? What were these hunter-gatherers moving through a landscape without fixed addresses, gathering around these stone circles for what ceremony, what belief, what story about the world that required a physical monument to house it? We don't know. We have the stones. We have the animals carved into them, each one potentially symbolic, each one potentially part of a cosmological map that made complete sense to the people who built it and is now entirely lost to us. We have the evidence of large-scale cooking, animal bones by the thousands, the remains of feasts. We have the post holes and the circles. We have the extraordinary, undeniable fact of the temples themselves. And we have silence where the explanation should be. Let that silence be comfortable. Let it be one of those silences that doesn't require filling. The world has always contained things that resist full explanation. And Göbekli Tepe is simply one of the most honest examples, one of the places where the ancient world says clearly, I was here. I was more than you thought. I was doing something. And the rest is for you to wonder about, quietly, in the dark. There are moments in the history of archaeology when a single object changes everything. Not a site, not a landscape, a single object. The Antikythera Mechanism is one of those objects. It was found in 1900 by sponge divers working off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera in the wreck of a Roman-era cargo ship that had sunk somewhere around the 1st century BCE. The divers brought up statues and amphoras and bronze objects and various artifacts, as divers working shipwrecks so often do. One more beautiful piece of ancient salvage, one more window into a world that went down with a vessel in a storm. But among the salvage was a lump of corroded bronze, encrusted, unimpressive to look at, the kind of thing you might set aside and come back to eventually when the more glamorous statues had been catalogued and displayed and studied. When researchers eventually opened the corroded lump, they found gears, dozens of interlocking gears, some with teeth so fine they could only be made by a highly skilled craftsman, arranged in a configuration of extraordinary complexity. Dials, pointers, inscriptions in ancient Greek, mechanisms within mechanisms, each one part of a larger integrated system that, once understood, turned out to be something almost impossible. It was an astronomical calculator, an analog computing device made entirely of bronze that modeled the movements of the sun and moon and the 5 planets known to ancient Greek astronomers, predicted eclipses on a 19-year cycle, tracked the ancient Greek calendar, tracked the Metonic cycle used for coordinating lunar and solar calendars, and likely tracked the Olympiad cycle, the 4-year period between the ancient Olympic Games. It was made roughly 2,100 years ago. The level of mechanical sophistication required to build this device was not believed prior to its discovery to have existed until the 14th century CE. More than 1,000 years later, the differential gear, which is one of the key mechanical components of the Antikythera mechanism, was thought to have been invented in the 16th century. It was in this device 2,000 years before that. Let that stretch out for a moment. 1,000 years. 1,000 years of assumed technological history quietly collapsed by a single corroded lump of bronze found on the seafloor. Think about what that means, not just for the history of technology, but for how we understand the people who lived then. We have a tendency, even a very careful and well-intentioned one, to see ancient people as somewhat simpler than us. more superstitious, less technically sophisticated, moving through a world they could explain only in terms of gods and omens and sacred cycles, not in terms of gears and differential equations and predicted angular velocities. The Antikythera Mechanism does not permit that comfortable assumption. Whoever designed this device understood the movements of celestial bodies with a mathematical precision that required centuries of careful observation and a theory of planetary motion that was, for its time, astonishingly accurate. They then translated that mathematical model into a mechanical one, into a physical system of interlocking bronze gears that encoded the mathematical relationships in metal and could be operated by turning a handle. They made a machine out of the cosmos. They built time into bronze. That alone is breathtaking. But what makes it one of the great mysteries of ancient technology is what it implies about what else may have existed, because the Antikythera Mechanism did not come from nowhere. Something this sophisticated is not the first attempt. It is not the prototype. It is too refined, too integrated, too conceptually complete to be a first draft. It must have emerged from a tradition, from a lineage of similar devices, earlier and simpler, building up to this, from craftsmen who learned their skills from other craftsmen, from a theoretical framework that was transmitted generation to generation through teaching and practice and text, and almost none of that has survived. The tradition that produced the Antikythera Mechanism, whatever school of thought, whatever workshop, whatever accumulated knowledge, is gone. We have this one remarkable object, and we have silence where everything that preceded it should be. The sponge divers found a survivor of a tradition that the rest of history swallowed whole. How many other such traditions are there? How many other lineages of knowledge, complex and ancient and sophisticated, did not happen to produce an object that survived 2,000 years on a seafloor? How many schools of thought? How many accumulated wisdoms? How many practical sciences were carried only in the minds and hands of people, and not in bronze or stone, and are therefore simply gone? This is one of the melancholy undertones that runs through the study of ancient mystery. Not every lost thing becomes a question. Some things are lost without trace, without even the ghost of evidence to indicate they ever existed. The Antikythera Mechanism is the ghost. It is the trace, and it points back at something we will never fully see. That is worth sitting with for a quiet moment. The device is currently in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, in a specially designed case that controls the humidity and temperature around it. It has been X-rayed, CT scanned, studied with multispectral imaging. Each new technology that researchers bring to bear on it reveals new inscriptions, new details, new layers of information that the ancient craftsmen packed into every face and dial and gear tooth. More than 100 years after its discovery, researchers are still learning things from it, still asking it questions, and the mechanism, patient, bronze, extraordinarily old, keeps yielding new answers at a pace that feels almost deliberate, as though whoever made it wanted the object to continue giving for a very long time. Let your body sink a little deeper wherever you are. Let the weight of it all, the gentle, wonderful weight of so much human time and mystery, rest around you like water, like the kind of water you float in, where the effort required to stay at the surface is simply zero. You don't have to do anything. You are already held. The ancient world moves around us tonight, very softly, like mist. Like the kind of mist that settles into valleys in the early hours before dawn. You can barely see it, but you know it is there. You know the valley is full of something slow and cool and ancient and very, very quiet. Let's stay in that feeling for a little while before we go anywhere else. There is a library that no longer exists. It existed once, in a city that itself became a kind of myth, a city so associated with knowledge and light and human intellectual ambition that its name is still used, 2,000 years after its greatest moment, as a shorthand for the idea that knowledge can be gathered in one place, tended like a garden, made available to anyone who comes to look. The Library of Alexandria. You have probably heard the name. It has become one of those proper nouns that carries its own mythology, its own particular weight. When people say it, they are usually saying something about loss, about how much was destroyed, how much will never be recovered, how the burning of a library is a particular kind of tragedy, distinct from the burning of a building, because a building can be rebuilt, but the knowledge it held cannot always be recovered. But the Library of Alexandria is a mystery in a way that goes beyond the famous burning, which was itself not quite the simple act of deliberate destruction that popular imagination sometimes makes it. The history is more complicated and more quietly devastating than a single fire. The library was founded in the 3rd century BCE under the reign of Ptolemy I Soter, the general of Alexander the Great, who took control of Egypt after Alexander's death. and established a dynasty that would rule Egypt for 3 centuries. The Ptolemaic court had an extraordinary ambition, a kind of intellectual imperialism that matched their political one. They wanted to collect every book, not some books, not important books, every book. They sent agents across the ancient world to purchase scrolls. When ships arrived in the harbor at Alexandria, they reportedly confiscated the books on board, had copies made, and returned the copies to the ship's owners while keeping the originals. The official policy, as best we can reconstruct it, was that every text that existed in the known world should make its way to the shelves of the Museum, the institution of which the Great Library was a part, in Alexandria. At its height, the library may have held hundreds of thousands of scrolls. The exact numbers are debated. Ancient sources give varying figures, and the way scrolls were counted was not consistent across time. But even the conservative estimates are staggering. This was, by a significant margin, the largest collection of recorded human knowledge that had ever existed in one place, and it held things we can only imagine now. It held, we believe, the complete works of Aristotle, not the fragmentary, filtered, incomplete collection that survived into the medieval period, but the full body of work, including the dialogues that he wrote for general audiences in the style of Plato, and that were apparently considered in antiquity to be among the most beautiful prose in the Greek language. None of those dialogues survive. They are as completely gone as though they had never been written. It held the original texts of the Greek tragedians, not just the small selection that survived by accident through the Byzantine copying tradition, but the full output of Aeschylus and Sophocles and Euripides, and the dozens of other playwrights whose names we know from references, but whose works are gone. Of the perhaps 90 plays that Sophocles wrote, we have 7. Of the perhaps 80 that Aeschylus wrote, we have 7. Of the perhaps 90 that Euripides wrote, we have 18 or 19. The rest are gone. It held works of science that we know existed only because later writers cited them. Works on mathematics, on optics, on the mechanics of machines, on the properties of materials, on the construction of instruments. Works that might have answered questions we are still asking about the level of ancient technological knowledge, about what experiments were conducted and what results were obtained, about whether the tradition that produced the Antikythera Mechanism was codified anywhere in writing. The library likely held that codification, and it is gone. The destruction did not happen in a single night. The library declined over centuries, through a combination of budget cuts and political neglect and smaller fires and the gradual shift of intellectual gravity away from Alexandria as the Roman Empire consolidated and the center of learned culture moved westward. Julius Caesar's famous fire in the harbor, traditionally blamed for a large portion of the loss, may have damaged a warehouse of books intended for export rather than the library proper, or it may have done significant damage, depending on which ancient source you trust. The final decline was probably less dramatic than a great fire and more like the slow fading of a candle. The acquisition stopped. The scholars drifted away. The scrolls that were not being read began to deteriorate. And eventually, the institution that had been the intellectual heart of the ancient Mediterranean world simply ceased to function. The knowledge it held did not all vanish at once. Much of it was copied and recopied and transmitted through chains of scribes in monasteries in Constantinople and Baghdad and Toledo, eventually finding its way back into Western European intellectual life during the Renaissance. Much of it, indeed, is sitting in libraries right now. The heritage of what the Library of Alexandria preserved and passed on, even if the original building is long gone. But much of it is simply not there. Much of the ancient intellectual world is simply absent. And when you try to add up what is absent, when you read the references in surviving texts to works that do not survive, when you count the known playwrights whose plays are lost, when you think about the mathematics that must have existed to make the Antikythera Mechanism possible, the absence starts to take on a specific shape. It starts to feel like the shape of a different history, a history in which certain developments did not have to wait for the Renaissance, a history in which the slow rebuilding of knowledge that occupied so much of the medieval period might not have been necessary, a history in which the distance between the ancient world and the modern one might have been significantly shorter. That is a strange and melancholy thought. Let it drift through you gently. Don't hold it too tightly. The history we have is still extraordinary. The minds that rebuilt what was lost were still extraordinary. The path that human knowledge took through the world was still beautiful, even if it was longer and more roundabout than it might have been. But there is a particular quality to the mystery of things that were deliberately collected, deliberately preserved, and then lost anyway. A quality different from the mystery of things like Göbekli Tepe, which was buried by its own builders, or the Nazca Lines, which were made in the dry certainty that the plateau would hold them. The Library of Alexandria was a conscious act of faith in the future, a belief that knowledge should be gathered and kept safe and made available, and the loss of it is a reminder that even the most intentional preservation is fragile, that time takes things, that the future is not always kind to the gifts the past tries to leave it. And yet, here we are in the dark, turning the pages of that inheritance, using the knowledge that survived, thinking with the tools that made it through. The library burns and burns, and something continues. The night is deepening around you. Your breath is quieter now. Your body is heavier in the good way, in the way that means you are releasing, letting go of the small held tensions that we accumulate through a day without noticing, the tiny clenches and braces that are so constant they become invisible until they soften.
Let them soften now. Let the weight of everything you are holding, thoughts, worries, to-do lists, unfinished conversations, let all of it become lighter, like something gradually set down rather than suddenly dropped.
We are not in a hurry. There is all the time in the world. Far to the south of Alexandria, deeper into the African continent, there is a country called Zimbabwe, and in the northern part of that country, in a valley surrounded by granite hills, there is a ruin, a large ruin, a complex of dry stone walls, walls built without mortar, without adhesive of any kind, each stone shaped and fitted to sit against its neighbors with such precision that the structures have stood for centuries. Great Zimbabwe. The name means, in Shona, something close to House of Stone or venerated houses, and the ruins that bear this name are among the most remarkable architectural achievements in sub-Saharan African history. At the height of its power, somewhere between the 11th and 15th centuries CE, Great Zimbabwe was a city of perhaps 10 to 18,000 people, one of the largest cities in Africa at the time. It was the capital of a kingdom that controlled the gold trade between the interior of southern Africa and the coastal trading posts that connected to the broader Indian Ocean network. Gold, ivory, cattle, imported porcelain from China, glass beads from the Arab world. All of this moving through Great Zimbabwe, in and out, generation after generation, making it not just a regional power, but a node in a global trading network that stretched from the interior of Africa to the ports of Arabia and India and the manufacturing centers of China, and then Sometime in the 15th century, it was abandoned. The kingdom declined, perhaps due to the depletion of local resources, perhaps due to shifting trade routes, perhaps due to political fracturing that sent the ruling class and the population to new centers of power. The exact reasons, like so much about Great Zimbabwe, remain partially uncertain. When European travelers began writing about the ruins in the late 19th century, there was a persistent and troubling insistence in some colonial quarters that the structures must have been built by someone other than the ancestors of the people who live in that region today. The Phoenicians were suggested, the ancient Egyptians, the Queen of Sheba, anything to avoid the clear and straightforward conclusion that the people of sub-Saharan Africa had, on their own and without outside assistance, created a sophisticated, organized, architecturally accomplished civilization. That resistance was not science. It was ideology, and it was wrong. The archaeological evidence is consistent and clear. Great Zimbabwe was built and inhabited by the ancestors of the Shona people as part of a sequence of development in the region that shows a continuous local tradition of stone construction and social organization building over centuries. There is no mystery about who built Great Zimbabwe. The mystery, and there is one, though it is a more interesting one than the racially motivated alternatives, is about what we still don't fully understand about the kingdom's political organization, its religious practices, the specific social structures that made a city of 10,000 people in medieval sub-Saharan Africa possible, and the details of the trade networks that sustained it. We have the walls, we have some artifacts, we have the imported goods that show the reach of the trade. We have the grain storage facilities and the cattle kraals and the platforms that may have been used for ceremony. We have the great enclosure, whose outer wall rises up to 11 meters high and extends for 250 meters, and whose inner structures include a mysterious conical tower of solid stone, solid, with no internal chamber, no entrance, no obvious function, standing tall at the center of the complex. What was the tower for? No one is entirely sure. It has been interpreted as a symbol of royal power, as a grain bin, as an astronomical marker, as a purely symbolic architectural statement, a monument to the permanence of the kingdom, the solidity of its foundations, the unyielding nature of its stone. None of these explanations has been definitively confirmed. The tower stands in quiet stubbornness, answering nothing. There is something in the history of Great Zimbabwe that goes beyond archaeology into a kind of moral mystery, a mystery about perception and bias and the stories we tell ourselves about who is capable of greatness. Because for decades, the evidence was sitting right there in the stone walls and the imported Chinese porcelain and the sophisticated construction, and some observers simply refused to see it. The mystery, in that sense, is not only about the ruins, but about us, about how completely our assumptions can obscure the things directly in front of us, about how history is written not only by the victors, but by whoever controls the narrative, and how much can be erased or distorted in the service of a story someone else wants to tell. Great Zimbabwe stands now as a national symbol of Zimbabwe. The country takes its name from it. The ruins are a World Heritage Site, and the walls that the builders fitted without mortar, stone against stone, shaped and balanced and placed with such care, they are still standing, still holding, still patient. Stone is one of the persistent themes of ancient mystery. It appears again and again in the circles at Stonehenge and at the dozens of similar sites across Britain and Ireland, in the Moai of Easter Island, in the Trilithon at Baalbek in Lebanon, where a single foundation stone weighs more than 1,000 tons, in the precisely cut granite blocks of Egyptian temples that would challenge the precision of modern cutting tools, in the megalithic temples of Malta that are older than the pyramids. Stone is what the ancient world chose when it wanted something to last, and it is interesting to think about why. Stone is difficult to work. Stone is heavy. Stone requires enormous effort to quarry and transport and shape and set in place. Other materials are easier. Wood is lighter. Clay is more workable. Mud brick dries quickly in the sun. And yet, again and again, across cultures that had no contact with each other, human beings chose stone when they were building something they wanted to survive, as though they knew at some level that they were building for us, as though the people who raised the stones at Stonehenge, whoever they were and whatever they believed, understood that the work they were doing might outlast everything else about them, their language, their names, their stories, their gods, and that the stone itself would carry something forward into a future they could not see or imagine. Not information, exactly. Not a legible message. Just presence. Just the fact of effort, the fact of intention, the fact that something was worth doing well enough and carefully enough to outlast 100 generations. Stonehenge is estimated to have been built in several phases over many centuries, the main phase of the familiar stone circle, dating to roughly 2500 BCE. The blue stones in the inner circle, the smaller ones, distinctive in their geological composition, came from the Preseli Hills in Wales, more than 200 miles away. They were transported to the Salisbury Plain sometime around 4,000 years ago by people who had no wheeled vehicles and no draft animals large enough to pull loads of that magnitude. How they did it remains actively debated. The sledge theory, the raft theory, the glacial transport theory, the idea that some of the stones were moved partially by Ice Age glaciers, and the builders simply found them closer than Wales. Experimental archaeologists have tried various methods using period-appropriate materials and demonstrated that human-powered transport over long distances was possible in principle. But the specifics, the exact route, the exact method, the organizational infrastructure required to coordinate a work project of that scale across what must have been multiple generations, those specifics are still fuzzy. And then there is the question of why. Why Wales? Why those particular stones from that particular outcrop in those particular hills? The Preseli Hills are not the nearest source of suitable stone. There are other places closer to Salisbury Plain where stone could have been quarried, but the builders apparently went to Wales, apparently wanted those specific stones. Researchers have noted that there are springs near the Preseli Bluestone outcrop that were associated in prehistoric and historic Welsh tradition with healing waters, sacred water. And some have suggested that the blue stones themselves may have been considered to carry some inherent power, some quality associated with healing or protection or connection to something larger, and that they were worth the extraordinary effort of transport precisely because of that quality, not despite it. If that is true, then Stonehenge is not just an astronomical calendar, or a ceremonial gathering site, or a monument to the social power of the people who built it. It is also a reliquary, a place where objects of power were brought together from across a landscape, assembled into a configuration that concentrated and organized their power and made available to a community for purposes we can only guess at: healing, ceremony, burial, the movement of seasons, the observation of the sky. All of these are associated with Stonehenge in the archaeological record, and perhaps all of them were true simultaneously. Perhaps the site was all of these things at once, not divided into separate functions the way we tend to divide things in the modern world, but held together in a single complex of meaning that made the astronomical and the healing and the funerary and the ceremonial all aspects of the same continuous practice. That integration, that sense of the world as something whole and unseparated into departments, is one of the things that is hardest for the modern mind to reconstruct when thinking about ancient sacred sites. We want to know what it was for, what was the primary function, what was the purpose, and the answer may be that those questions assume a division of the world that the people who built Stonehenge did not make, that for them, the movement of the stars and the healing of the body and the honoring of the dead and the marking of the year were not separate things that happened to occur at the same location, but a single, seamless, continuous engagement with the world as they understood it. Your breathing has grown quieter. I can feel it, even at this distance, this soft, imaginary distance between a voice and the person listening to it in the dark. The night is very quiet now. Whatever sounds were around you earlier, the occasional car, the distant hum of appliances, the small creaks of a house or building settling into the temperature of the night, even those are softer now, more distant, absorbed into the general stillness that the late hours bring. You are doing beautifully. Just rest here for a moment, in the space between one idea and the next, in the soft gap where thought dissolves just slightly before beginning again. There is no hurry. There is only this. Across the Pacific Ocean, on a tiny island at one of the most remote inhabited points on Earth, there stand nearly 900 stone figures looking out at the horizon. Easter Island, Rapa Nui, a volcanic speck of land 2,000 miles from the nearest continental coast, 3,000 miles from South America, alone in the middle of the vast, deep, blue-black Pacific. The Moai. You have seen them in pictures, these figures, the long faces, the heavy brows, the prominent chins, the compressed expressions that could be read as sorrow or gravity, or simply the neutral weight of stone. What photographs rarely convey is their scale. The average Moai stands about 13 feet tall and weighs about 14 tons. The largest, never fully erected, is nearly 70 feet long. The largest successfully erected Moai stands 33 feet and weighs about 82 tons. They were carved from the volcanic tuff of a single quarry site on the island, the crater of Rano Raraku. Using only stone tools, they were then transported across the island, sometimes for miles, over terrain that offers no obvious path of easy travel, and erected on platforms called ahu, many of which are positioned at the coastline, their backs to the sea, their faces turned inland toward the communities they were meant to watch over. This is something people often get backwards. The Moai face inward. They look over the living, not over the ocean. They are not watching for ships or watching the horizon. They are watching the villages, the fields, the families. They are ancestors, or representations of ancestors, whose mana, whose spiritual power was meant to flow from the carved image out across the landscape they overlooked, protecting and blessing the people who lived beneath their gaze. How they were transported remains one of the genuinely fascinating, unsolved questions. The island's oral tradition speaks of the Moai walking, of the ancestors using spiritual power to move the statues upright across the landscape. Experiments in the 1980s and more recently have demonstrated that this description is not purely metaphorical, that a sufficiently large team of people using ropes and a controlled rocking motion can move a large Moai in an upright position, walking it forward using gravity and momentum in a way that would look, from a distance, exactly like the statues were walking. The oral tradition may have encoded, in its own poetic language, a reasonably accurate description of the actual technique, but there are still details that resist easy explanation. The logistics of feeding and organizing the labor force required to carve and transport and erect nearly 900 statues on an island with limited agricultural land and limited resources remain a matter of ongoing study. And the broader story of Easter Island, which includes not just the Moai, but a period of significant social upheaval in which many statues were deliberately toppled by their own people, is a story that touches on questions of ecology and resource management and the sustainability of complex societies that are as relevant to the present as to the past. There is a theory, widely discussed, somewhat controversial in its specific claims, that Easter Island represents a cautionary tale about environmental collapse, that the intensive labor required for Moai construction contributed to deforestation and soil degradation that eventually destabilized the island's ecosystem and triggered social crisis. The more recent scholarship is more nuanced, suggesting that the story is more complicated and that European contact, which brought disease and disruption, played a larger role in the island's troubles than internal collapse alone. But even the nuanced version of the story has something in it that is worth holding. The Moai themselves, these patient stone faces gazing over an interior that was once forested and is now largely grassland. They carry a history in their silence, not of failure exactly, not of cautionary tale, but of effort and commitment, and a civilization that by any measure achieved something remarkable on one of the most isolated pieces of land on Earth, and that faced difficulties that no amount of carving or erecting could solve. They are still there. The ones that were toppled have mostly been re-erected in recent decades. They face inland again. They watch. And the island is quiet around them, as it has always been. The Pacific enormous on all sides. The distance between Rapa Nui and the rest of the world, measured in something that feels almost like time rather than space. Let us move very gently toward a different kind of mystery now. Not the mystery of stones and monuments and lost civilizations, but the mystery of the mind, of the body, of what happens inside us when we are doing exactly what you are doing right now. The mystery of sleep itself. You would think, given how universal sleep is, given that every human being who has ever lived has spent roughly a third of their time doing it, that we would understand it completely by now, that the biology would be mapped and the function fully explained and the why of it fully settled. But we don't entirely. We have learned an enormous amount, particularly in the last half century, about the mechanisms and the stages and the neurological processes involved. But the deepest question, why sleep at all evolutionarily? Why not simply rest without losing consciousness? Why not simply slow down the body's metabolism and allow the muscles to recover without also losing awareness of the environment, losing the ability to respond to threats? That question does not have a single, fully settled answer. Sleep makes us vulnerable. While we sleep, we cannot run, cannot fight, cannot respond to a predator or an intruder or a fire. The fact that every known animal with a nervous system sleeps in some form, that even the most cautious and threat-conscious animals, even prey animals who spend their waking lives looking over their shoulders, even they sleep, suggests that whatever sleep does, it does something so important that the vulnerability cost is worth paying. What is that something? One answer is memory. The evidence that sleep is crucial for memory consolidation is strong and growing. During certain stages of sleep, particularly slow wave sleep and REM sleep, the brain appears to replay the experiences of the day, processing them, selecting which ones to strengthen and which to let fade, integrating new information into existing frameworks of understanding. If you want to learn something and remember it, you need to sleep on it. Quite literally, the phrase turns out to be accurate. Another answer is cellular maintenance. During waking hours, the activity of the brain generates waste products, metabolic byproducts of the chemical work of thinking. During sleep, a process called the glymphatic system becomes particularly active. Cerebral spinal fluid flows more efficiently through the spaces around brain cells, effectively washing out the accumulated waste. This process is much less active during waking hours. Sleep is, among other things, when the brain cleans itself. A third answer involves something called synaptic homeostasis, the idea that during waking hours, connections between neurons constantly being strengthened as we learn and experience things, and that if this strengthening continued indefinitely without correction, the system would become saturated, unable to form new connections, because the existing ones are already at maximum strength. Sleep, according to this hypothesis, allows a global resetting, a downscaling of synaptic strength across the board, so that the most important and recently reinforced connections stand out against a quieter background, and the system is ready to learn again tomorrow. These explanations are not mutually exclusive. Sleep may do all of these things simultaneously. It may do other things we have not yet identified. The biology of sleep is remarkably complex, and the understanding of it continues to evolve. But even with all of this biological understanding, there remains something about sleep that resists purely mechanical explanation, something about what it feels like to approach sleep, the slow dissolution of the boundary between waking and dreaming, the way thoughts become gradually more associative and less logical, the way the body becomes heavy and the room becomes distant, and the mind begins to do something that is neither thinking nor not thinking, but something in between that remains one of the most intimate and mysterious experiences of human existence. Every person who has ever lived has undergone this transition thousands of times, and no one has ever been able to fully describe it from the inside, because by the time you have crossed over, you are no longer able to report. There is something beautiful in that, in the fact that the most private transition we undergo, repeated every day of our lives, is fundamentally indescribable, that no amount of neuroscience or psychology can fully capture what it is like to fall asleep, because falling asleep means losing the very consciousness that would be required to observe and report on it. Sleep keeps its own secret, and tonight you are keeping it too, drifting toward it, closer with every breath.
The night is very deep now.
Somewhere outside, the world is still moving, the planet still turning on its axis, carrying everything on its surface through the dark half of its rotation. The stars above, the real stars, not the ones in city light, their ancient light having traveled incomprehensible distances to arrive here and now and be absorbed by whatever atmosphere is above you. But all of that is very far away. What is close is this: your breath, still and slow, your body settled, the darkness behind your closed eyes, which is not empty, but is full of something, the way the ocean floor is not empty just because we can't see it. Let yourself be there. Let yourself be in that space, not awake, not quite asleep, but somewhere in the soft geography between the two, where time moves differently and the edges of things dissolve, and there is only warmth and quiet and the feeling that everything is exactly as it should be. The ancient mysteries are still out there. The Nazca Lines still stretch across the pale plateau. The Moai still look inland over their island. The stones of Stonehenge still align with the midsummer sun. The gears of the Antikythera Mechanism still turn in imagination, tracking the position of the moon. The walls of Great Zimbabwe still stand without mortar, fitted stone against stone. All of it is still there, holding its silence, asking its questions, waiting with the extraordinary patience of things that have already waited for thousands of years and can wait a little longer. And you are here in the dark, drifting. The mysteries can wait. The ancient world is patient. You have everything you need. There is a place in the Iraqi desert, in what was once the heart of ancient Mesopotamia, where the soil is layered with history in a way that is almost visible to the eye, where the tells, the great mounds left by one civilization, building on the ruins of another, generation after generation, rise from the flat plain like gentle hills, like the slow, accumulated breath of centuries pressed into earth. This is the land between the Tigris and the Euphrates, the land that ancient Greeks called Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, the land that a succession of cultures called home for more than 5,000 years. The Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Persians. One of the places where writing was invented, where the wheel was developed, where the first known law codes were written down, where astronomers first identified the planets and tracked their movements and developed the mathematical models that would eventually feed into Greek astronomy and then into medieval Islamic astronomy, and then into the Copernican revolution, and eventually into everything we know about the solar system today. The Sumerians are perhaps the oldest culture in that long sequence, and they are, in many ways, the most mysterious. Not because they left nothing behind. They left an enormous amount. Tens of thousands of clay tablets, inscribed with cuneiform, the wedge-shaped writing system that is among the earliest in the world, administrative records, legal documents, temple inventories, astronomical observations, mathematical tables, and literature, real literature, myth and poetry and prayer and lament, including what is arguably the oldest surviving work of narrative literature in the world, the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh is not a mystery in the sense of being unexplained. It is relatively well translated. It is read and studied and taught, but it is a mystery in the sense of being older than almost anything else we have, and in carrying within it themes that feel startlingly familiar, even across 5,000 years of distance. Gilgamesh is a king, partly divine, partly human, who is initially cruel in his exercise of power, then transformed by friendship with a wild man named Enkidu, who enters civilization from the forest. The friendship between them is deep and physical, and described in terms of love, the love of brothers, the love of companions. And when Enkidu dies, Gilgamesh is devastated in a way that drives him to seek something impossible, the secret of eternal life. He travels to the ends of the earth. He crosses the ocean of death. He finds Utnapishtim, the one mortal who was granted immortality by the gods, who tells him the story of a great flood in which the gods destroyed humanity, but Utnapishtim survived by building a boat and loading it with animals. If that last detail sounds familiar, it should. The parallels between the flood story in the Epic of Gilgamesh and the flood story in the book of Genesis are so close that when the Gilgamesh tablets were first translated in the 19th century, the scholar who did it, a self-taught expert named George Smith, who worked for the British Museum, is said to have been so astonished by the parallel that he stood up from his chair and began removing his clothes in excitement. The Gilgamesh flood narrative predates the Genesis flood narrative by at least 1,000 years, possibly much more. This is not a mystery in the sense of being contested. The dating is well established. What is mysterious is the relationship between the two stories. Did the authors of Genesis draw on Sumerian tradition, passed down through Babylonian culture, which was the dominant cultural power in the ancient Near East for much of the period when the Hebrew scriptural tradition was being consolidated? Almost certainly there was influence of some kind, but whether the influence was direct textual borrowing or a more diffuse transmission of an older shared mythological inheritance, perhaps, as some researchers have speculated, a cultural memory of actual flooding events at the end of the last ice age, when the Black Sea may have undergone a sudden and catastrophic expansion, flooding coastal settlements. That question remains open. The idea that flood myths from cultures around the world share a common core of historical reality, that there were real catastrophic floods, possibly multiple ones, at the end of the last ice age, as ice sheets collapsed and sea levels rose, and that these floods were traumatic enough to be remembered and transmitted and mythologized for thousands of years. This idea is taken seriously by a significant number of researchers, not as a literal account of a single worldwide flood, but as a collection of regional catastrophes, each locally world-ending, each leaving its mark in the stories that survivors told their children and their children's children. And if that is even partially true, then the flood myths of the world, Gilgamesh, Genesis, the Vedic story of Manu, the Greek story of Deucalion, the indigenous flood stories of North America and Mesoamerica and Australia are all, at some level, echoes, reverberations of real events, traveling through time in the medium of story, distorted and elaborated and made sacred, and then redistorted again, until what we have now is a set of narratives that are almost impossible to decode back to their historical origins. Stories are not as durable as stone, but they are more durable than almost anything else. A story can travel across 10,000 years if enough people care about it. If enough parents tell it to their children at night, in the dark, before sleep. If it carries something in it that resonates, fear and survival, and the preciousness of what we have, and the terror of losing it. Something that touches a part of the human nervous system that doesn't change much across generations. Perhaps the oldest stories survive because they are about the oldest fears. The wind that blows over the Sumerian tells tonight is the same wind that blew there. when Gilgamesh was first being sung. Not literally the same air molecules, of course. The atmosphere is always mixing, always moving, always cycling through the planet's systems. But the wind itself, as a phenomenon, as a physical process generated by the temperature differential between land and water and air, that has been constant. The wind has never stopped. And there is something in that continuity. The wind over ancient ruins, the stars above ancient stones, the ocean surrounding ancient islands. That serves as a kind of connective tissue through time, a reminder that the world itself has been here for all of this, that the planet watched the Sumerians write on clay and watched the Nazca draw lines in the desert, and watched the Easter Islanders walk their Moai across the island, and is still here, still turning, still carrying us through space at a speed and in a direction most of us never think about. The Earth moves at roughly 30 kilometers per second in its orbit around the Sun while you have been lying there. In the time since you began listening to this, you have been carried millions of kilometers through space without feeling it, without any sensation of movement whatsoever, because the Earth carries you so smoothly and at such a constant rate that there is no inertial difference to feel. You are moving through space right now, in absolute silence, without any resistance or friction, through a vacuum so empty that the distance between stars, if you tried to walk it, would require more steps than there are atoms in your body. And the Earth holds you through it quietly and completely, and brings you back around to the same point in space it started from every 365 days. And the sun is still there each morning when you wake, and the stars are still there each night when you settle back into darkness. There is a comfort in that kind of reliability. The universe is full of mysteries and things we cannot explain, full of ancient puzzles and lost civilizations and vanished knowledge and unanswered questions. But it is also full of extraordinary consistency. The physics that governed the first stars still governs the stars we see tonight. The speed of light has been constant for the entirety of the universe's existence. Gravity works the same way at the edge of the observable universe as it does here, in this room, on your body, pulling you gently toward the center of the Earth as you lie still. The same gravity that shaped the solar system holds you in your bed tonight. That is worth sitting with for a moment. Not the intellectual statement, but the feeling of it. The same force. The same gentle, persistent pull connecting you through physics to every other massive object in the universe, across distances so enormous they require specialized notation to write down. You are part of all of it. You have always been part of all of it. Let your body become heavier. Let the thoughts that are left, whatever still moves gently across the surface of your mind, like shadows on water, let them slow. Let them become less distinct. Let them be images rather than sentences, colors rather than ideas. You are very close now. The mysteries continue beyond this moment, out there in the world where the stones wait and the ocean holds its secrets, and the ancient inscriptions mark their meaning into surfaces that have not yet been fully read. All of it continues. The questions don't go anywhere. The planet holds everything patiently.
And you are here, very still, very quiet.
In the highlands of Bolivia, at an altitude of nearly 4,000 meters above sea level, where the air is thin and the cold comes early and the light has a quality unlike almost anywhere else on Earth, a quality of extreme clarity, the kind that comes when there is very little atmosphere between you and the sky. There is a site called Tiwanaku. Tiwanaku was, between roughly 400 and 1100 CE, one of the most important ceremonial and perhaps political centers in the pre-Columbian Andes. It was not an empire in the conventional sense. It had no army moving through the landscape, no governors imposed on conquered peoples in the way that later Andean empires operated. Instead, it seems to have been a kind of pilgrimage center, a place of immense spiritual authority, whose influence spread not through force, but through the power of its ritual life, its architectural grandeur, its access to the sacred, and the movement of its prestige goods, finely made ceramics and textiles and objects of religious significance, out across a network of communities that looked toward Tiwanaku as a center of cosmic meaning. The architecture of Tiwanaku is extraordinary. The builders worked with massive stone blocks, some weighing several hundred tons, quarried from sites many kilometers away and transported to the building site by methods that, again, remain not fully understood. The gateway architecture uses a form called megalithic construction, in which enormous stone slabs are fitted together with unusual precision. Their surfaces carved in complex, geometric, and figurative designs that encode religious symbolism that researchers are still working to decode. The Sun Gate, the Puerta del Sol, is perhaps the most famous single object from Tiwanaku. It is a large, carved stone gateway cut from a single block of andesite, its upper portion dominated by the figure of a deity standing on a stepped platform, holding two staffs, surrounded by 48 attendant figures that appear to be running or kneeling. The figure at the center is known as the gateway god, or, in later Andean tradition, Viracocha, the creator deity, the one who shaped the world and set it in motion. The carving is complex and precise and deeply layered with meaning that we are still in the process of understanding. Some researchers have argued that the figures around the central deity encode a calendar, a system for tracking the solar year, the agricultural cycle, the positions of certain stars, in visual rather than written form. Others have focused on the cosmological significance of the imagery, on what the deity's position and attributes tell us about Tiwanaku's understanding of the structure of the universe and the role of human beings within it. What is certain is that Tiwanaku was a place of enormous spiritual significance for a very long time. The site continued to be a place of pilgrimage even after the collapse of the Tiwanaku polity, even after the site itself had been largely abandoned and partially dismantled. Later cultures, including the Inca, incorporated Tiwanaku into their own religious and mythological understanding, treating it as a place of origin, a place where the world began, where the first humans were created, where time itself started. That is a remarkable kind of afterlife for an abandoned city, to pass into myth while still standing, to become, in the imaginations of succeeding civilizations, not a historical place, but a cosmological one, not something that existed in the past, but something that belongs to the structure of reality itself, a fixed point in the sacred geography of the world. There is something to learn from that, if you look at it quietly. The things that human beings make, the most beautiful, the most carefully considered, the most deeply meant, sometimes outlast not only their makers, but the civilization and the belief system of their makers, and pass into the hands of other people who find in them something they can use, something that answers a need or fills a space in their own understanding of the world. And in that transmission, in that passing from hand to hand across centuries and across cultures, something of the original meaning persists. Not the literal meaning, perhaps, not the specific mythological framework that the builders of Tiwanaku were working within when they set the gateway god above the entrance to their sacred space, but something underneath that, something about the human need to mark the places where the sacred touches the earth, to create forms that point towards something larger than the forms themselves, to build things that outlast the people who build them. That need is constant across all the cultures, in all the periods of human history, across every level of technology and organization and geographic circumstance. The impulse to mark the sacred in stone is there. It doesn't require literacy. It doesn't require organized religion in the institutional sense. It doesn't require a complex state or a powerful elite. It seems to arise again and again wherever human beings are, which suggests that it arises from something in us, from something in the human nervous system, or the human social structure, or the human relationship to mortality, to the awareness of our own ending, that finds its expression in the making of permanent marks. We build because we know we will not last. We carve because the carving might. The night has reached that particular quality that only comes in the deep hours, not silence exactly, but a settling, a reduction, the sense that the world has been distilled down to its essential qualities: darkness, stillness, the quiet of your body, the long, slow rhythm of rest. You may be nearly asleep. If you are, that is exactly right. That is what this space is for. Let the thoughts that remain become lighter, less structured, more like weather than like thinking. Clouds moving through, shapes forming and dissolving, images without captions. The gateway, God on his carved stone platform, holding his staffs, his attendants running eternally at his sides in the thin Bolivian air. The Moai facing inland, their expressions unreadable. The blue stones carried from Wales to the Salisbury Plain, arranged in a circle that still points toward the summer solstice sunrise. The gears of the Antikythera Mechanism, patient bronze, turning their miniature planetary dance. The lines at Nazca, barely visible from the ground, resolving into hummingbirds from above. The walls of Great Zimbabwe, stone fitted against stone, without mortar, still standing. The tablets of Gilgamesh, the wedge marks of a story that has been told for 5,000 years and is still being told. All of it drifting through the dark, soft as mist, ancient as stone, patient as the turning of the earth. There are mysteries that live in the sky, not the obvious ones, not the planets and the galaxies and the black holes, though those are mysteries too, patient and vast. There are other sky mysteries, ones that are closer and stranger and more intimately connected to the human experience. Ball lightning is one of them. It has been reported for centuries, across cultures, across continents. A floating sphere of light, typically the size of a grapefruit or a basketball, sometimes larger, sometimes as small as a pea, usually appearing during or after thunderstorms. It glows white, blue, yellow, orange, red. It moves, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly, sometimes hovering in apparent defiance of wind. It passes through walls and windows. It sometimes makes a hissing sound. It sometimes smells of sulfur or ozone, and then, after seconds or minutes, it either fades quietly or disappears with a loud pop or explosion. The accounts span from medieval monastery records to 20th century first-hand reports from pilots and military personnel and ordinary people who encountered something in a storm and could not explain it. The phenomenon is well documented in the sense that there are thousands of independent, consistent accounts from credible witnesses. It is poorly documented in the scientific sense. There is almost no confirmed photographic or physical evidence that has been conclusively analyzed, and no one has ever reproduced it under laboratory conditions. The explanations that have been proposed over the years fill a remarkable list: plasma, combustion reactions involving organic materials in soil, microwave radiation, quantum mechanical effects, oxidizing metal aerosols, luminous fungal matter, atmospheric nuclear effects. Not one of these has achieved consensus. Not one fully accounts for all the reported properties. Ball lightning is one of those phenomena that sits in an unusual position in the scientific landscape, too consistently reported to dismiss as hallucination or fabrication, but too elusive to study directly, too transient and unpredictable to pin down, too strange in its apparent properties to fit neatly into any existing physical framework. The sky does this sometimes, offers things that don't fit. The Hessdalen lights, persistent, luminous phenomena observed in a valley in Norway, documented since the 1930s and still occurring, have been studied with scientific instruments and still resist full explanation. They are real in the sense that they appear on radar, that they have been photographed, that they have been measured. What they are remains genuinely uncertain. The Min lights of the Australian outback, the Marfa lights of the Texas desert, persistent, glowing phenomena associated with specific landscapes, reported by generations of observers, studied with modern instruments, and still not definitively explained. Earth lights, one proposed category calls them, The idea that luminous phenomena can be generated by geological stress, by the compression of quartz-bearing rock along fault lines, as a kind of natural piezoelectric effect. This theory has some experimental support and explains some of the geographic clustering of these phenomena near geologically active areas. But it doesn't explain everything about their behavior. There is something quietly humbling about the persistence of the unexplained in the natural world. We tend to tell ourselves, in the modern age, that the era of mystery is over, that everything that can be understood has been understood, or at least that everything real has been cataloged, and the remaining unknowns are merely technical details awaiting the right instrument. But the lights in the sky suggest otherwise. They suggest that the world is still producing things that surprise us, that the atmosphere and the earth and the electromagnetic environment we live within are still not fully mapped. We are still, in some sense, explorers. And now, the voice grows quieter, the thoughts slow, the images become fewer and more distant, like lights on the far edge of the ocean, barely visible, part of the horizon rather than the foreground. The world is very large. It is very old. It holds more mystery than any single night can contain, more than any single life can exhaust. And that is, in the end, a kind of gift, because it means there is always more to return to, always another question waiting quietly in the dark, always another ancient thing that has been patient and will continue to be patient and will be there the next time you come looking. Tonight, though, the questions rest, the ruins rest, the carved stones rest, the gears of the Antikythera Mechanism hold still, as they have held still for most of the 2,000 years since they were last turned by human hands. Everything is still, including you, especially you. Let your breath become smaller, softer, just the gentlest movement, in and out, in and out, the body doing its quiet work. The darkness is warm, the night is deep. There is nowhere else you need to be. There is nothing that needs your attention. The ancient world has been keeping its secrets for thousands of years, and it will keep them a little longer through the night while you rest. The Nazca hummingbird hovers in stone over the pale plateau. The stones of Göbekli Tepe stand in the limestone hills, waiting for the morning they have been waiting for 11,000 years. The Pacific holds the island of Rapa Nui in its enormous dark blue hands. And you are here in the warmth, in the quiet, drifting now, drifting. The questions will be there tomorrow. Tonight, only rest. Tonight, only this soft and endless dark. Tonight, only the sound of your own breathing, slower now and slower still. Somewhere in the distance, a civilization is asking a question in stone that no one has answered yet. Somewhere in the depths of the ocean, ancient walls hold their shape against the pressure and the dark. Somewhere in a museum in Athens, a corroded mechanism waits patiently for the next researcher who will ask it something new. And here, right here, where you are, only stillness, only warmth, only the gradual, gentle dissolving of the boundary between waking and something much more restful. You have done so well. You have carried the day all the way to here, and now you can set it down. The ancient mysteries can wait. The world can wait. Sleep well and good night.